From the outside, the world looks predictable. Crime follows patterns. Killers have signatures. Motives make sense. But every so often, a case surfaces that breaks all expectations. A story so strange, so unsettling, and so deeply unknown that it forces you to question everything you thought you understood about human nature. Tonight, we're going deeper than headlines. Deeper than documentaries. Deeper than the cases everyone has already heard 100 times. These are the stories buried in foreign police archives, whispered about in small towns, sealed inside courtrooms on the other side of the world, and hidden under layers of silence, fear, or corruption. Some ended in justice. Some were covered up. And some remain unsolved because the truth was too dangerous to speak aloud. Over the next 10 cases, we're following the fingerprints of killers who crossed borders, victims who vanished without a trace, investigations that collapsed under political pressure, and mysteries that still haunt entire nations. Each case connects to the next, piece by piece, forming a picture of a world far more complicated and far more terrifying than the one we think we know. So take a breath, turn the volume up, and settle in. Because once you step inside these stories, there's no going back. Welcome to 10 cases you've never heard of. And trust me, you won't forget them. Case 1. Ray Rivera's body was found in a locked hotel building he had no reason to be in, with a mysterious note taped behind his computer at home that referenced secret codes, movies, and Freemasonry. If this was suicide, nothing about it behaved like one. On May 24, 2006, 32-year-old Ray Rivera was supposed to be working from home in Baltimore. He'd moved there with his wife Allison just months earlier, hoping for a fresh start. He was athletic, smart, a writer, with dreams of making films and telling stories. Instead, he became one. That afternoon, Ray received a phone call that seemed to change his entire mood. Allison wasn't home, but her co-worker, staying with them at the time, heard Ray answer. His tone shifted. He suddenly became agitated, grabbed his keys, and rushed out of the house, leaving behind his glasses, his money clip, and most of what he usually carried. He never returned. Days went by. Allison came back from a business trip to an empty home. No note. No sign of struggle. No credit card use. His car was eventually found in a parking lot near the historic Belvedere Hotel in downtown Baltimore, where Ray had no apparent business. That's when things got strange. Allison and friends began searching the area around the Belvedere. One of them walked to the top of a parking structure near the hotel and looked down. There, on a lower roof of an annexed part of the Belvedere building, was a gaping hole. And directly below it, Ray's body. He had apparently fallen through the roof from above. But no one had seen him go in. The Belvedere was a secure, old building with limited access points and locked doors. There was no obvious way for him to get to the ledge necessary to make that fall. No clear CCTV trail placing him inside. And the angle and distance of the hole made the jump physically questionable. The official theory leaned towards suicide, that Ray somehow reached a high ledge, possibly the roof, and jumped to his death, crashing through the roof of the annex and landing in a conference room that had been empty for days. But the physical evidence didn't agree easily. The hole in the roof suggested a straight vertical drop, with little horizontal distance, while the nearest accessible ledge was too far away to match a clean trajectory, at least according to some investigators. Meanwhile, back at home, Allison made a chilling discovery. Taped behind Ray's computer was a folded note, almost like a secret letter to himself. It referenced Freemasons, movies, famous directors, people he admired, strange phrases and quotations, and what looked like a personal code no one could break. The FBI reviewed it, but never publicly described it as a suicide note. It read more like some kind of mental construction, a manifesto or puzzle that only Ray understood. Ray had been working for a financial newsletter company owned by one of his close friends, Porter Stansberry, a figure who later refused to cooperate publicly and issued a company-wide gag order restricting employees from speaking to investigators. That only fueled speculation. Had Ray discovered something he wasn't supposed to? Did he stumble onto financial wrongdoing or something darker? Or was he suffering from a psychiatric break that no one noticed? His injuries were also unusual. Some experts have argued that they didn't perfectly fit a fall from the height being suggested. The pattern on his body, the position he was found in, and the fact that some of his personal items, like his phone and glasses, were found on the roof near the hole in surprisingly good condition, all raise questions. To this day, there's no confirmed footage showing how Ray entered the Belvedere. No confirmed witness placing him on the roof. No clear explanation of that phone call that pulled him away from home. and no satisfying decode of the bizarre note behind his computer. Was Ray pushed? Was he thrown? Did he jump in panic, thinking he was being followed? Or did he die in some other way and get staged to look like a fall? The official manner of death remains labeled undetermined. But the one thing everybody agrees on is this: whatever happened to Ray Rivera on that quiet May evening, the full truth never made it to the ground with him. If you liked that case, you will not believe what is up next. An MI6 codebreaker was found dead, locked inside a sports bag, in his own bathtub. There were no fingerprints on the padlock, and the official explanation, probably an accident, only made the mystery worse. On August 23, 2010, police responded to a quiet flat in Pimlico, London, after neighbors complained about a bad smell. The apartment was owned by the British Foreign Office and used by intelligence staff. Inside the bathroom, they made a discovery that looked more like a crime novel than a real investigation. In the bathtub was a large red North Face sports bag. Inside that bag was the contorted body of Gareth Williams, a 31-year-old codebreaker and mathematics genius who worked for GCHQ and was on secondment to MI6. The bag was zipped shut and secured with a small padlock on the outside. The key to that padlock was inside the bag, under Gareth's body. The first question everyone asks is simple: how? How does a grown man climb into a sports bag, zip it shut from the outside, lock it with a padlock, and then place the key underneath his own body? The Metropolitan Police tried to recreate it. They had experts and escape artists attempt to lock themselves in a similar bag, in a dry run. None of them could do it the way Gareth was found. Even more troubling, there were no fingerprints on the padlock, on the bag, or around the bathtub. No DNA from anyone else. No signs of a struggle in the flat. His phone and other devices had been factory reset. Evidence of his digital life was gone. The official line leaned toward a personal activity gone wrong, hinting at some kind of sexual experimentation or self-bondage, heavily fed by leaked press speculation. But a coroner's inquest in 2012 concluded the opposite. Gareth's death was unnatural and likely to have been criminally mediated. In other words, likely murder. Gareth was brilliant, introverted, and deeply private. He worked at the highest levels of code breaking, dealing with sensitive information that never sees daylight. That alone has fueled endless theories. Was he killed by a foreign intelligence service? Was someone inside his own agency involved? Did he know something he shouldn't have, or refuse to cooperate in a way that made him a target? The bag, the padlock, the missing fingerprints, the wiped devices, all of it reads like the ending of a spy thriller, except there's no last chapter that explains who did it. Intelligence agencies denied foul play. The police ultimately dialed back from the coroner's blunt assessment and floated the theory that Gareth had somehow locked himself in the bag by accident. But almost no one who has seriously looked at the case finds that convincing. More than a decade later, the man in the bag case remains one of the UK's most baffling, and perhaps most uncomfortable, mysteries. Because if someone could do this to a highly trained intelligence officer, in his own government flat, under the nose of the security services, and walk away without leaving a trace, what else have they gotten away with? Case 3. 9 experienced hikers fled their tent in the middle of the night, barefoot in the snow, and were found dead with broken bones, missing eyes, and strange radiation on their clothes. No one alive can explain why they ran. In February 1959, a group of 9 seasoned Russian hikers led by Igor Dyatlov set out to conquer the Ural Mountains. They were young, experienced, and well-equipped. The kind of group who could handle almost anything nature decided to throw at them. What no one expected was that the real danger wouldn't be a storm, or a cliff, or a wild animal. It would be something invisible. When the group failed to return on schedule, search teams were sent into the mountains. What they found has become legend. The hiker's tent was discovered first. It was still standing, partially buried in snow, but here's the detail that made even hardened rescuers stop cold. The tent had been cut open from the inside. Not unzipped. Not torn by the wind. Slashed outward with a knife. Footprints led away from the tent. Barefoot prints. Some in socks, some with one shoe, some with none. All heading downslope into the dark forest below, in temperatures that could kill a person in minutes. It looked like they had run from something inside the tent, but there were no signs of anyone or anything attacking them. The bodies were found in stages. 2 under a cedar tree, partially undressed, showing signs of hypothermia. 3 more scattered between the tree and the tent, as if they tried to crawl their way back. Months later, as the snow melted, searchers found the remaining 4 deeper in the woods, in a ravine. These bodies were different. They had massive internal injuries, broken ribs, skull fractures, like they'd been in a high-speed car crash. And yet, there were no external wounds to match that level of trauma. One hiker was missing her tongue. 2 were missing their eyes. Their clothes, tested by Soviet authorities, showed traces of radiation. The official investigation at the time concluded that the hikers died because of an unknown compelling force. That's it. That was the explanation. An unknown force. Since then, theories have exploded. An avalanche, though the slope and tent location don't quite match typical avalanche patterns. Military tests gone wrong, secret weapons, parachute mines, or radiation exposure. A rare weather event, like infrasound from katabatic winds causing panic and disorientation. Or something stranger, an encounter with something or someone that the Soviet Union didn't want on record. Recent studies have tried to reframe the incident as a freak combination of weather and poor decisions. But they can't cleanly explain everything. The cut tent, the strange injuries, the radiation, the scattered group, some sheltering beside a fire, some crawling back toward the camp, some in the ravine with broken bodies as though smashed by pressure, not impact. 9 people entered the snow that night as rational, experienced hikers. Something made them abandon their only shelter, run into a lethal storm, and die scattered across the mountain. The Dyatlov Pass incident remains one of the great unsolved mysteries of the 20th century. An open case where the most chilling part isn't what we know, it's what we never will. Case 4, God's Banker. He was found hanging from Blackfriars Bridge in London with bricks in his pockets and cash stuffed in his suit. Italy called him God's Banker. The question was, whose God decided he had to die? On June 18, 1982, early morning in London, a postman noticed something hanging beneath Blackfriars Bridge. At first he thought it was debris. Then he realized it was a body. Suspended from scaffolding under the bridge, with an orange rope around his neck, was Roberto Calvi, one of Italy's most powerful bankers. His pockets were filled with bricks and thousands of dollars in various currencies. The initial verdict was suicide. But almost no one who knew Calvi believed that he'd chosen to die under a foreign bridge in this bizarre, theatrical way. Back in Italy, Calvi had earned the nickname God's Banker because of his close financial ties to the Vatican. He had operated at the center of a shadowy web where politics, religion, and organized crime intertwined through secret accounts and illegal transfers. When his bank, Banco Ambrosiano, collapsed under a mountain of debt and scandal, Calvi fled Italy under a false name, convinced his life was in danger. He had reasons to be afraid. Investigators later connected Banco Ambrosiano to the Vatican Bank, to Propaganda P2, a secret Masonic lodge linked to far-right politics and corruption, and to the Sicilian Mafia. Calvi knew where the money went, where it didn't, and who was laundering what. In the years after his death, forensic experts re-examined the evidence. They concluded that the way his body was positioned, the marks on his neck, and the lack of telltale signs on his clothes all pointed away from suicide. To get to the spot where he was found, he would have had to climb awkward scaffolding in the dark with bricks in his pockets and a rope tied perfectly. It didn't make sense. Witnesses later claimed that Calvi had met with mafia figures and that a hit squad was sent to deal with him once he'd become a liability. The location itself, Blackfriars Bridge, has long been theorized as symbolic. The P2 Masonic Lodge referred to its members as friars. Hanging under Blackfriars Bridge, weighed down with bricks, looked less like a random choice and more like a message. Several people were eventually charged with involvement in his murder, including alleged mafia members, but all were acquitted. The Vatican denied direct wrongdoing, though later admitted to moral involvement in the financial scandal. So who killed God's Banker? Was it the mafia tying off a loose end? A Masonic message to others who might betray the lodge? Or a deadly cleanup operation to protect powerful figures in Europe's financial and religious institutions? Decades later, Roberto Calvi's death is officially classified as murder. But the hands that held the rope, and the orders that gave the command, remain in the shadows, somewhere between Rome and London, between faith and money, between God and the men who spoke in his name. Case 5. The Woman in Room 2805. On June 3, 1995, a well-dressed woman checked into the Oslo Plaza Hotel in Norway, one of the city's most upscale locations. She used the name Jennifer Fairgate or Fergate, depending on the transcription, and claimed she was from Belgium. She gave a corporate address that turned out to be false. No credit card. No real passport. Just cash. Staff noticed she traveled light. Very light. No real luggage. No personal items beyond a few clothes. But she kept to herself, paid on time, and raised no alarms. For 3 days, she stayed behind the closed door of room 2805. On June 6th, the hotel staff tried to deliver a message. No response. The room's Do Not Disturb sign had been hanging for days. A security guard went up to check. He knocked. A loud sound followed, like a gunshot. When they finally opened the door, she was lying on the bed, dead, with a gun in her hand and a bullet through her forehead. At first, it looked like suicide. But everything else in the room told a different story. There were no fingerprints on the gun. None on the bullets. None on the glasses or the TV remote. Many of her clothing labels had been removed. There was no wallet, no ID, no ticket stubs. The serial number on the pistol had been partially removed. Most bizarre of all, the trajectory of the bullet and the position of the gun were awkward. It was technically possible she'd shot herself, but the lack of blood on her hands and the angle raised serious doubts. Police tried to track her identity through Interpol, Belgium, and beyond. The address she'd provided didn't exist in the way she'd written it. Phone numbers went nowhere. No one reported a missing woman matching her face. It was as if Jennifer Fairgate had been constructed entirely for this one brief appearance in Oslo, ending with a single gunshot. Many now believe she was involved in intelligence work. The 1990s still sat in the shadow of the Cold War. Norway is a NATO country with strategic importance. A woman traveling under an alias, paying cash, stripped of labels and personal identifiers, with a gun in a luxury hotel room. It's not hard to imagine espionage. Others think she could have been a high-level criminal, perhaps connected to weapons dealing or organized crime, meeting someone who wanted her erased cleanly. Her body was eventually buried in an unmarked grave. Forensic attempts years later to reconstruct her face and DNA profile have brought theories but no answers. Whoever she was, either no one missed her, or the people who did know she was gone didn't dare say a word. The Oslo Plaza woman remains one of Europe's most haunting modern mysteries. A guest who checked in without a past, and checked out without leaving a future behind. Up next is Case 6. He radioed one last sentence, and then he was gone. No crash detected. No debris in the water. No body ever found. And the message he sent still chills investigators today. On the morning of November 14, 1999, veteran Norwegian pilot Erik Solheim took off from Vadsø Airport for what should have been a routine 40-minute cargo run across the frigid Barents Sea. He'd flown this path hundreds of times, knew every inch of coastline, every blind spot in the radar coverage, and every sudden change in Arctic wind that could turn a calm sky into a whiteout within seconds. But on this flight, just 10 minutes after takeoff, something happened that no one has ever been able to explain. At 8:47 a.m., Eric's voice came over the radio sounding steady, calm, completely in control. He requested a minor course correction, ordinary, procedural, exactly what you'd expect from a pilot with nearly 4 decades of experience. And then, without emotion, without panic, without any sign that anything was wrong, he said 7 words that would define the case forever. Something is following me, not another plane. Air traffic control immediately responded, asking him to clarify, to confirm whether he meant weather interference or another aircraft without a transponder. But Eric didn't answer. The radio remained open, static, light interference, a faint distortion like someone breathing too close to the microphone. But no words. At 8:49 a.m., his transponder blinked out. At 8:50, the radar lost him entirely. At 8:52, the emergency beacon activated for exactly 3 seconds, and then disappeared as if it had been switched off manually. Search and rescue teams scrambled helicopters, boats, and aircraft. They combed the icy waters for 9 days straight. They found no crash site, no floating debris, not even an oil slick. A plane cannot vanish without leaving a trace, yet this one did. Investigators confronted the only remaining possibility: equipment failure, a sudden dive, an engine explosion, but none of those theories matched the data. The air pressure remained stable until the transponder cut. There was no descent pattern, no deviation in altitude, no sign of mechanical distress. It was as if the aircraft had simply been plucked off the radar. Months later, Eric's family revealed a detail they had never shared publicly. 2 weeks before his disappearance, he had confided that he'd experienced odd interference on nighttime flights. Strange lights pacing the aircraft. Navigation instruments briefly flickering. A sensation that something was watching him from the sky. Aviation experts dismissed the idea, pointing to rare atmospheric reflections, high-latitude aurora activity, and magnetic anomalies near the Arctic Circle. But no official explanation has ever resolved the final question: How does an aircraft vanish in a monitored region with no physical evidence? Today, the disappearance of Erik Solheim remains one of Norway's most baffling aviation mysteries. Not a single piece of his aircraft has ever been recovered. No distress call was ever heard. And his final recorded words continue to haunt the investigators who reviewed them. "Something is following me. Not another plane." For decades, the Barents Sea has kept its secrets. And whatever Erik saw out there, it left nothing behind. Case 7. The woman who vanished on the night train to Vienna. In 2012, 42-year-old Slovak business consultant Eva Hruskova boarded the overnight train from Prague to Vienna for what should have been a routine cross-border trip, a quiet ride across Central Europe she had taken dozens of times before, and nothing about that night suggested danger because the train was nearly empty, the sleeping cabins were clean, the staff familiar. And Eva, a seasoned traveler, carried herself with confidence. But somewhere in the silent stretch between Brno and the Austrian border, Eva disappeared forever. When the train pulled into Vienna's Hauptbahnhof, conductors noticed her cabin door slightly ajar, her suitcase neatly placed on the rack, her passport still inside, her phone tucked into her coat pocket as if she had simply stepped out for a moment. But Eva was nowhere on the platform, nowhere on the rails, nowhere in the station, and nowhere on the cameras. It was as if she had evaporated mid-journey. Investigators reconstructed the route, interviewing passengers who remembered hearing a muffled argument in the corridor shortly after midnight, a man's voice, low and agitated, followed by a rapid series of footsteps, then silence that lasted the rest of the night. One passenger recalled seeing a tall man wearing a dark coat leaving the sleeping car section at the next stop. Another claimed the cabin attendant was unusually nervous when asked about Eva. But the train staff insisted nothing unusual had happened, suggesting Eva might have voluntarily disembarked at an earlier station, a theory instantly dismissed when her family emphasized Eva's strict punctuality and the fact she was traveling for an important meeting the next morning. When Austrian police expanded the search, they discovered something chilling, a 16-kilometer stretch of isolated track between two tunnels where no cameras existed, a blind zone where someone could push a person from the moving train, and the body would fall into steep ravines or thick forest nearly impossible to search. Specialized teams combed the terrain but found nothing. Not a shoe. Not a scrap of clothing. Not a body. As investigators dug into her life, they uncovered a second layer of tension. Eva had recently blown the whistle on financial misconduct within a major logistics company. Emails showed threats. Friends described a rising fear in her voice. And 3 weeks before her disappearance, she mentioned being followed. But with no body, no witnesses, and no concrete physical evidence, the case stalled. The only anomaly? Train staff records showed an unregistered employee working that night, a man who was never identified and who vanished from the system the very next day. To this day, Eva's family believes she was targeted, removed from the train in the dark, and her body disposed of somewhere along the border. Authorities quietly agree but cannot say it publicly. The night train still runs. Cabin 14B, Eva's cabin, is rarely booked. And passengers still report hearing soft knocks along the corridor in the hours just before dawn, the same time Eva disappeared into the European night. Case 8. For all you medical crime fans. He walked out of the operating room smiling. 15 minutes later, he no longer existed. In 2017, in coastal Spain, respected trauma surgeon Dr. Rafael Vega completed a routine procedure, a simple fracture repair, the kind he had performed hundreds of times, and colleagues said he was unusually relaxed afterward, humming under his breath, telling a nurse he couldn't wait to pick up his daughter after school. Security cameras recorded him leaving the surgical wing, walking calmly toward the staff locker room, and that was the last verified moment he existed in the physical world. 15 minutes later, another surgeon entered the locker room and found Vega's clothes still in his locker, his keys, his wallet, even his half-eaten protein bar on the bench, but Vega himself was gone. Not missing, gone. No camera recorded him leaving. No one saw him exit. No alarms were triggered. The hospital was a sealed, badge entry facility, and Raphael's ID was not used again. When police arrived, they assumed he suffered a medical emergency and collapsed somewhere in the building, but searches of every room, vents, utility shafts, crawl spaces, basement storage, revealed nothing. Cadaver dogs found no trace of his scent outside the locker room. But what investigators did find raised far darker questions. Raphael had been quietly reviewing patient files connected to a cluster of suspicious deaths, elderly patients who entered the hospital with minor issues but died unexpectedly. He had confided to a colleague that something deeply wrong was happening behind closed doors, and he intended to speak to authorities. 2 days before his disappearance, a senior administrator confronted him, demanding to know why he was accessing old files. A heated argument followed. The administrator denied this later, but a nurse overheard every word. Security logs then revealed a disturbing gap. The camera outside the locker room went offline for exactly 17 minutes, beginning 90 seconds after Raphael entered. The footage before and after was intact, but the missing segment aligned perfectly with his disappearance. The hospital blamed a power fluctuation. Investigators called it sabotage. When Raphael's wife spoke publicly, she said Raphael told her he had finally found proof of wrongdoing and would take it to police after his shift. He never made it. To this day, no body has been found, no suspects charged, and the hospital remains operational. The administrator who confronted him was transferred 3 weeks later. The patients Raphael was investigating were quietly reclassified. And every year on the anniversary of his disappearance, his daughter visits the hospital entrance, leaving one question behind. How can someone vanish inside a building full of doctors? Case 9. The diver who never reached the surface again. His team watched his oxygen gauge rise toward the surface, but he wasn't on it. In 2010, elite Norwegian rescue diver Lars Brenvik descended into the freezing depths of the Sonefjord to inspect a sunken research vessel. He was experienced, fearless, and one of the few divers trained for extreme cold operations. The descent was smooth, the comms crystal clear, and at 92 meters, Lars confirmed entry into the vessel's broken hull. His team monitored everything, oxygen levels stable, heart rate normal, until suddenly his breathing shifted into rapid bursts, the audio crackling with panic as he whispered, "There's someone down here." No one else was scheduled. The vessel had been abandoned for years. Yet Lars insisted he saw movement, a shape slipping behind a doorway, a silhouette too large to be debris. His team told him to abort, ascend immediately, and Lars agreed, activating his buoyancy control. His oxygen gauge began climbing as expected, rising toward the surface on the team's monitor. But when his backup divers reached the ascent line, the line was empty. No diver, no body, no broken gear, and the oxygen transmitter believed to be climbing was still attached to the wreck, as if someone had unclipped it and sent it up alone. The official explanation claimed equipment malfunction. Divers who knew Lars called it impossible. Even stranger, a thermal camera captured a heat signature inside the wreck after his disappearance, a tall human-shaped figure lingering for several seconds before fading away. The Norwegian Navy sealed the site within 24 hours. Records were classified. Lars's family received no answers. Years later, an anonymous whistleblower leaked that the sunken research vessel had been working on biological deep-sea experiments, testing chemical dispersal tech long before environmental guidelines existed. Several crew members allegedly fell ill before the ship sank. Lars may not have encountered a person, but something that used to be one. He is officially listed as lost at sea. Those who know the truth say he never left the wreck at all. Case 10 is twisted. She warned everyone someone was watching her. She said she could feel him, hear him, even smell his cologne at night. But nobody believed her, until her blood was found in a place she had never been. She first reported the break-ins in 2016. Small things at first: a moved notebook, a missing bracelet, a kitchen cabinet left open that she was certain she had closed. Her name was Danielle Hardin, a 32-year-old nurse living alone in Portland, Oregon. Independent, quiet, responsible, the kind of woman who was never taken seriously when she said she felt unsafe. Every time she filed a report, police told her the same thing: there's no sign of forced entry. No fingerprints. No damage. No evidence of anyone entering her apartment. They suggested she was stressed, overworked, maybe misremembering things. Danielle insisted she wasn't. "He's coming inside," she said, "and he watches me while I sleep." But no one listened. Then her neighbor mentioned something that chilled her. He said he heard footsteps in her attic, long, deliberate movements, even though Danielle didn't have an attic entrance inside her apartment. It was accessible only from the outside of the building. She told police again. They shrugged it off. Weeks later, Danielle woke up with a nosebleed. Not unusual on its own, except she found dried blood smeared on her pillow in a pattern she couldn't explain. Like someone had touched her face while she slept. That same night she noticed something worse. Her phone had been moved 5 inches to the left. She knew because she always placed it perfectly aligned with her charger. And now it wasn't. She tried setting up a camera, but it malfunctioned twice. The third time, the footage disappeared completely. She went to her landlord begging for the locks to be changed. He refused, saying the building's master key system couldn't be altered. 2 months later, she vanished. Her car was parked neatly outside her building. Her purse was inside her apartment. Her phone was found on her bed. Nothing was missing, except Danielle. Police finally took things seriously. They searched her apartment again, this time thoroughly. In the crawl space above her ceiling, a place no tenant had access to, they found something that made seasoned detectives freeze. A sleeping bag, food wrappers, empty water bottles, a stack of photographs, all of Danielle, taken while she slept. And one more thing, a set of clothes that didn't belong to her, including a jacket containing a wallet. The wallet belonged to Mark Creswell, a maintenance worker who lived 2 buildings away. A man with a clean record, quiet reputation, and no reason to be suspected. When detectives broke into his apartment, they found a hidden storage room behind a false wall. Inside, they discovered Danielle's missing bracelet, her missing notebook, and dozens of items she never realized were gone. And then, in a plastic container sealed with duct tape, they found something that made officers step back. Dried blood. Danielle's blood. But the location of the blood was the real twist. It wasn't found in his apartment. It wasn't found in her apartment either. It was discovered in an abandoned storm drain nearly a mile away, a place she had never been and had no reason to visit. When they arrested Creswell, he said nothing. Not a word. Not a denial. Not an admission. Nothing. To this day, Danielle has never been found. Not a bone. Not a scrap of clothing. Not a single trace. Detectives believe Creswell lived in her ceiling for nearly 6 months, entering her apartment through the crawl space whenever she slept or left for work. He watched her every move. He memorized her routines. He took her belongings piece by piece the way a spider dismantles a web before devouring its prey. The disturbing part? There were signs he planned to do it again, to someone else. Another woman in a nearby complex reported strange noises above her ceiling just weeks after Danielle disappeared. Creswell is currently serving time for burglary, stalking, and unlawful entry. But without a body, prosecutors couldn't charge him with murder. He refuses to speak at all. And somewhere in Portland, people still report noises in their ceilings. And that is where this chapter closes. Another life changed forever. Another mystery that still echoes. Another reminder that evil rarely announces itself. It moves quietly, in plain sight, behind ordinary faces and familiar doors, waiting for a moment when no one is looking. If you're still here, still listening, still trying to make sense of the darkness people carry, then you're exactly who this channel is for. There are more stories. Stories buried in old court files, hidden behind borders, whispered about in places the world forgets. Stories with endings so unbelievable you'd swear they were fiction. But every single one of them is real. If you want more of this, if you want the truth told with no shortcuts, no filters, no sensationalism, then follow this channel. Hit follow. Turn on notifications. Don't miss the next case, because the next one might be the one you've never heard, but will never forget. Follow now, and I'll meet you on the next story.